Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Toolkit. It's Wednesday, just afternoon, which means it's time to start going, blowing, and growing. And as you know, my name is Mike. I'll be your host. I have taken the time each week to have really awesome guests on so that we can have collaborative conversations, very straightforward conversations on what it's taken them to get into leadership and management roles, what it has taken them to grow along their journey, their successes, maybe some of their failures, so that you have the opportunity to learn from them. And I am super, super excited today. I have a good friend of mine on the show introducing Mr. James Klaus. James, welcome to the show today. And I forgot to pull your number off of the screen just yet. We'll get to that. James he's got a background in automotive, has an absolutely infectious smile, an overwhelming amount of energy. Every time that you and I have connected, it's just always an absolute joy and pleasure for me because you always have so much value to add to people. And so I'm excited to have you on the show today, man. Thank you for taking the time to join me on the Leadership Toolkit.
Thanks for having me on. I'm very excited to be here, and I will try not to speak super fast.
That it's okay if you speak super fast, man. That's how that's part of the mojo. That's part of the magic. So
there you go.
Do me a favor, if you would. I'm going to give you just a few minutes to share with our audience kind of who you are, what your background is, your background in automotive, leadership, management. I know you've had a lot of connections, and you have a lot of influence and have experienced a lot of other businesses and stores. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I'm James Klaus. I've been in and out of the auto business. I guess just in the auto business since I was 21 years old. So over 20 years. And it really started by mistake. I was living in Bozeman, Montana, and wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was 20 nothing, and I was selling office supplies and going to school. And I went to a car dealership. It was called Montana Import Group, and it sold Subarus, Audis, Volkswagens, Hyundais, and a few other brands. And I walked in, and the general manager had been buying pallets of paper, right?
Okay.
And I upsold him to a larger deal. And he sat me down and was like, "You have a lot of potential." And shockingly enough, I became a car salesman 2 weeks later, and have never left auto since. Got my first managerial position at that same store, Montana Import Group, about 18 months later in the finance office. And then from there, I went over to Bozeman Motors Incorporated, which was a Ford store, a Lincoln store, a couple RV stores, a few used car outlets, as well as a large leasing entity. And that's where I really got put into leadership, where I was the assistant general manager of the stores and really got thrown in with the wolves. After that, joined a technology/marketing company called Dealer Teamwork, was there for 6 years in the chief sales officer position. So learned a lot there from being obviously leading a very large team. Spent a little time at Vista Dash and Dealer Built with my friends Micah Burkholz and Dan Moore, and learned a lot from them. And then now I'm at a company called Cognition, where I'm a vice president, and we're doing great things in that Amazon space. So 20 years in automotive, but Mike, most importantly, I'm a father and I'm a husband. I have 2 daughters, a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. And that's what makes me go.
Absolutely. I no, and I think that's so often we get into these leadership roles. First off, thank you for sharing all that. I think it's, I know quite a bit of your background. I think you and I met probably, I don't know, 10 years ago when you were at Dealer Teamwork at some point. And I think that's something that's often easy for leaders and certainly for managers to overlook. Is it's like we're constantly go, 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 we're growing and we got to do this stuff. But you really hit the nail on the head there right at the beginning. Is it's like, why do we do what we do? Right? You have your family and those little girls, and like that shines through for me in the joy that you bring to the industry, the way that you just speak with people. It's like, I think you really know why you're there serving. And I think that's very, very powerful.
Well, we all have a boss, Mike.
Yeah. We all have yeah.
and I got a lot of overhead at home. So
absolutely.
But we all like you say, we're on the leadership toolkit right now. And
yeah.
The interesting thing is I have to lead my children every day. I have to lead them and make sure that they live a solid life, that they become good human beings. And that's probably the most important leadership role that I'm ever going to be put in my existence. And I would say it's probably the same thing for you as well. Like there's no
Absolutely.
greater leadership role than being a parent. And there's no greater joy or fulfillment that you can receive than the smile and admiration of your children. I mean, that's what it's all about. And that will keep you going. So when I'm slow, when I feel run down, like I don't want to go anymore, I just remember I spend a lot of time on the road. I'm away from them. So you better get your butt out of bed and go out there and make it happen.
Absolutely. That's a very strong motivator. Let me ask you a question, because I think you bring up a really good point. Like there is no stronger motivator. There's no stronger leadership role than being a parent. One of the unique things is, I think, other than looking at our parents, when we get into parenting, were you ready for being a parent when you got into being a parent? How did you learn to parent your girls?
I think anybody who has children has to answer this very honestly. No, of course I wasn't ready to be a parent. I thought I was, and then
Sure.
that beautiful girl, arrives, and you're helpless and happy at the same time, and you
Hmm.
become okay being helpless. You realize how big the world is at that moment. You realize how now your life is no longer about you anymore. Your life is about the people you serve, which I would say has probably led a lot of my leadership style as well. Because I'm a big believer in servitude leadership, right? So
Hmm.
you serve those that you lead, and there is no better case study on that than parenthood.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, going back, because you said, hey, I got into the auto industry and then I got promoted up and so forth. Did you receive some management and leadership training? What sort of training did you receive early on in your career that you realized, hey, this is what I want to do and this is where I want to keep going and this is how I'm going to make the magic happen?
So
Can you
that's a
pinpoint that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it was to begin, it was due to poor leadership. Um, I learned how to manage by not managing the way my first general manager managed me. It
Okay.
was it was very aggressive. I was the youngest of all the managers in the dealership, so that kind of made me a easy target when anything would go wrong. And so I was low hanging fruit on this gentleman, and he would come at me hot and heavy almost on a daily basis. In a very negative tone. And those that know me know I'm not a negative person. I'm
Not
a
at all.
very, very positive person. And I'm going to respond much better to positive reinforcement than negative. Right.
Sure.
But I learned quickly from him how not to manage, because what he did was, over my course of my 18 months under his tutelage, was I learned that negative doesn't work. I've learned not setting the path for those that you lead, not defining exactly what you want from them or need from them, is a recipe for failure. And unfortunately, no, I didn't have any management training. I got thrown into a managerial position because I dominated the floor
Hmm.
and was managing at 23 years old, guys from 40 to 60 years old, gals 40 to 60 years old that have been doing this for 20, 25 years. I've been doing this for 20 to 25 months. Um, that was alarming, you know. But
Sure.
the beautiful thing was, during that training, if you will, of how not to manage, I forged a relationship with our used car manager at the store, a gentleman named Greg Morris. I'm still
Okay.
very indebted to Greg to this day. We went and left that dealer group together. And he's the
Interesting.
one who saw faith in me. So he saw potential. And so he
Hmm.
said, hey, James, we're making a move. We're going to this dealer group, right? You're going to be in charge of this store. I'm going to be in charge of all of these stores. You're going to be my guy there, and we're going to do this together. And Greg was great about it. So the first thing we would do every morning is we would drive all over town and drive through every dealer's lot. And he would want me to know, what are you looking at on each individual car? What do you think of the way their lots are arranged? What do you think of their inventory mix? What would you do if you ran this store? And we would go through our stores as well as competitive stores on this. Then he went one step further and he started taking me to the auction with him. And so I'd go to the auction, I'd go to Phoenix, I'd go to Salt Lake, I'd go to Spokane, I would go to Seattle, etc. And he taught me how to buy cars. And he let me make mistakes. If I felt strong about a car and he disagreed with me on it, he would empower me to make a mistake and say, hey, if you're not making a mistake, if we're not taking a loser every once in a while, we're not doing a good job. And that level of trust in me, plus let me fail a little bit to learn, was just the type of leadership I needed. So even though I started with that negative experience for that 18 months, I forged one of the strongest relationships I've ever had in my life from that same scenario. Greg and I then worked together for the next 8 years. We remain very close to this day, and it was the best example of management I've ever seen. And I thank him for this all the time, because it really has helped me with my managerial style.
No, that's phenomenal. So I always like to recap, especially if people are listening on the audio podcast later. And so I want to recap a couple things that I heard you say, and then I want to lead into a next question. But one, you said two really powerful things, or three really powerful things, when you were talking about that negative leadership style. And this is in my own words, so if I missed it, this is your chance to correct me, right? But number one was, and everybody should take note of this, you learned what not to do. I think we innately as humans, we'll look at people and go, man, if I ever got in that role, I ain't going to do that, right? Or, oh, hey, if you gave me a shot, here's how I would handle it. And I think that's a really powerful statement, because for anybody who's listening to this program, anybody who's ever wanted to be in leadership, anyone who's ever wanted to be a manager, you said, hey, if I just got my shot, I would do this, which from what I'm hearing you say, James, you did, and you made some mistakes and you won some stuff, but keep that fire burning when you do get your shot. You know, we say, oh, I'm going to do this. And then we accidentally emulate the person that we didn't want to be, right? Because that was our experience. The two things that I heard you say also, and this is for any leadership piece, or three things. One is leadership is servitude, right? You got to serve people. You said that early on. Two, negative doesn't work. It never has worked. But it's negative is just, it's not something that motivates people. For some reason, people get into these leadership and management roles and they think that authoritarian smash down style is what's going to drive people, and it just doesn't. And so I think that's really valuable. And then the third thing that I heard you say that really I picked out of this moment was you said, from that guy that didn't do well, he didn't know where he was going, or he didn't help tell you where he was going. So what I took from that is, like, if you don't have any vision, it's a recipe for failure.
Perfect recap. You said it much better than I did. So
no,
that's why.
I'm learning from you.
That's why you host. That's why you host the podcast, and I'm a guest, right? I'm
just taking notes.
Yeah.
I just take notes because it's so valuable to me to listen and learn from my guests. I think it's awesome. So, and then the other thing that you said with your friend Greg, you said, look, he was driving all over town, but I think one of the things that I took from that was he just led by example. Like, he was doing the things he expected you to do with him, right? Which I think is awesome.
Well, and what was interesting about that was he never told me what he was doing. Like, we just did it. And when we'd hop in a car, we'd just go out to the used car lot in the morning, put in open up the lockbox, hop in a car and start driving around. Those times in the car, looking back, I didn't realize it at the time, but that couple hours we'd spend together in the car was some of the most valuable conversations I've ever had, because we were talking about leadership, and we were talking about good experiences and bad experiences. And he was coaching me also on, you're a very young manager, and that's going to come with some very big negatives. And he allowed me to do what I needed to do to evolve. But the way he did it has stayed with me for years. And it's really interesting because, I mean, this is no wife, before I was married, before I had kids, all that kind of stuff. And he watched that whole evolution, which was also really cool. And you said something that I wanted to touch on. You said something, and it was, you heard me say. And a great person in my life is a guy named Peter Bosin. Peter Bosin used to be the managing partner of South Bay BMW. We worked very closely together. at Dealer Teamwork. I do consider him one of my mentors. And one time we were going at it, butting heads, going back and forth, passionate. And I was like, Peter, you said this, you said this, you said this. And he said, James, stop for a second. Don't tell me what I said. Tell me what you heard. And
mind blown.
Since that day, I've always now used that and explained to people. I said, don't tell people what they said. Tell them what you heard, because you might have heard them wrong. And that's very open-ended. And so when I heard you say, this is what I heard, it threw me right back into it. And it made me think, in order to be a good leader, you got to have some good mentors along the way.
Man, that is absolutely so true. And I think that that's something. I've got so many twists and turns we could go with right now, James. One is, so let me ask you, because I think that mentorship in many businesses is sort of a lost art. Like we view it as, oh, well, I've got these friendships, or, we have, it's like a trusted teacher along the way, right? Oh, this person made such an impact on me. But really being deliberate and being a mentor is sort of a lost art. And it is one of those things that definitely is extremely important, in my opinion. Let me ask you, just on this subject while we're here, what are some things that people should look for in a mentor? And how do you approach that? Do you just let it happen? Or do you actually have a conversation and say, hey, I'd like you to mentor me. I'd like to learn this from you, or vice versa from a mentor standpoint, if they see something in somebody?
That's a great question. I organically came across all my mentors, from Greg Morris to Peter Bosin to others along the way. And I was never actively searching for one. They all just kind of came into my life. And then along that journey, I'd finally be like, Greg, you're like a mentor to me. And you'd be like, wow, that's the biggest compliment I've ever gotten. And it's almost, I'd say, more flattering to be a mentor than be a mentee, because somebody's looking at you that way. But what would I look for in a mentor? I'll just tell you the traits of my two major ones is they're kind, they care about me, they're not selfish at all, they're 100% giving, and they're just good all around people that want to see me succeed. And I think it's natural that human beings want to help each other. It is a natural thing that you want to help other people, and find people that feel that same way, and you'll do great. And anybody, that reaches out to me, I'd love to help in any way possible. Reach out to, when I reach out to Peter or Greg, they're always willing to help me. I have another mentor named Ed Kohler who lives, down in Florida. It's fantastic. Anytime I reach out, they always are willing to help. They're always providing me with great insights, and they're always saying one thing. And this is actually one thing I would say to look for in a mentor. It's not like I have all the answers. And that's accurate. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody has this magical box with everything in it, right? We're just all just doing our best. And you got to be comfortable, with your best, and that being the best you can do.
No, all really good advice, and I appreciate all of it. Here's, I'll recap it. There's a couple things. One, and just because you were talking about contact, if anybody's listening, because I put this on the screen a couple times, but one of the things I asked James early on is, hey, if you're wanting to connect with him on a business level or a personal level, if you say, man, this guy's awesome, because he is, you can certainly reach out to him. You can either text or call. He said just flash his cell number on the screen. It's 406-595-4818. I would recommend, me personally, I'd recommend text first, because if you're just a random caller, but certainly you can connect there. Also, if you're gaining something out of this episode of the show, please throw some thumbs up on it. Share it with somebody that could use this, maybe somebody that you're mentoring, or maybe somebody you would like to mentor you, because we're in that part of the conversation. So a couple things that I keyed in on, just to recap, you said kind, caring, not selfish, genuinely good people, like morally upstanding people, and so forth. There's two things, one that you did not say and one that you did. One thing you specifically did not say was they're not about the numbers. When you're mentoring somebody, it's not about it's about that sort of ethereal results, right? How can I grow this person on some of the intangibles? But it wasn't necessarily about, well, what's this measurement? I think naturally in sales, I heard somebody say this recently from a program that I'm in, a coaching program that I'm in, and they're talking about goals. And oftentimes salespeople, and even like yourself, you brought up like, hey, how do you measure kindness, right? How do you measure caring? How do you measure that sort of connection? Salespeople are driven that way because they want to help somebody. Mentors are driven that way because they want to help somebody. But in sales, we operate heavily on ego-driven goals. Like, what's the number? How many sales? What's the outcome? Right? And so there's sort of a miss sometimes in that. And I think if you can really get in on that mentorship level with somebody, and here's what I didn't hear you say was, it's not necessarily mentoring them to, well, you have to sell X number of cars, you have to sell X number of advertising. You're mentoring them in some intangibles. That's one of the keys for me that is mentoring. The second thing is when you are either looking for a mentor, or you find somebody that happens to be in your life, like, you have to be open to it. Both parties have to stay teachable, right? The mentor has to stay teachable to say, hey, I don't have all the answers. And the person that's getting mentored, the mentee, has to stay teachable and be willing. Like you said, Bozeman. What did you say his first name was?
Who? Greg Morris?
No, not Greg.
Or Peter Bozeman.
Peter
Yes.
Bozeman.
Phenomenal human.
So one of the things that you mentioned about him was like, you're even in this heated moment, and he's like, look, stop. Let me teach you this, right in this moment. Like, those are the most teachable and most opportune times. One is he had to be willing to take that chance to be a little bit vulnerable, to say, hey, hold on a minute. And you had to be willing to hear what he was saying. So I think those are very powerful things. I want to go back for a minute too, because you were saying, hey, some of these naturally good leaders. Do you think people are naturally wired for leadership, or how does that come about? Because like you brought up Greg and you said, oh my gosh, this guy was just a phenomenal leader, and he was doing these things, and he's taking you on the ride alongs, and he's showing you, and he's letting you make mistakes. Is somebody like Greg naturally wired for leadership, or did he have to work at it?
I think that Greg, and this is a perfect scenario to answer this question. Greg was naturally wired for it. Greg's resting heart rate, I bet, in the heat of battle is like 70. You know what I mean? Like, nothing would rattle this guy. Like, he was cool as a cucumber at all times. Now, Peter was the exact opposite. He was an introvert and who got thrust into the spotlight. And he openly would tell me, he's like, I had to learn how to do this. I had to learn how to lead. I had to learn to get comfortable in this situation. And you made a great comment earlier about, being open to being led and being open to giving advice. And that takes a lot. And him sharing that with me meant a lot, because it means he was something that he was always working on. And this is a guy that was running the top BMW store in the nation, owning multiple other dealerships, owning power sports locations. I mean, highly, highly successful. And he's like, I didn't have it figured out. I had to figure it out there. And that's one thing that we can all take from a mentor is nobody just woke up in the morning and had it all figured out. We're all just trying our best. And you have to, and I keep saying this over and over, you have to accept that your best is your best. And if you put your best foot forward, that's all you can really do. And that was one, a mutual friend of ours, Dan Moore, would always talk to me about. Is like, your best is your best. He's like, my time working with Dan at VistaDash was so valuable to me, because I would, argue he is a natural born leader, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's got the charisma and that style, and people will naturally follow him. But all three people I just mentioned had drastically different styles, drastically different personalities. Interesting thing is Greg and Peter are actually extremely quiet humans, right? They're not chatty Cathys like myself. Mm-hmm. And then Dan. But I don't know.
I'll tag him in this.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't have to have a mentor that fits your personality. I would almost tell you, find a mentor that has a different personality than you, that looks at things through a different lens. Make sure they have a little bit of a different background than you, because that's how you learn from each other.
Well, and I think that's something that we naturally, human nature, we're attracted to the qualities that we like about ourselves, right? So we naturally are attracted to those people. I think that's a very powerful statement, is find somebody that's not exactly like you. What that takes is being deliberate. It takes a real knowledge of self, and it takes being deliberate to go out there and say, hey, let me find this person that can complement the areas that I need work in, you know? So
Absolutely.
I'd like to ask, so when you're talking about, leadership qualities, and you brought up, you said there's three vastly different people and they all have these different things. I think it was Peter, you said, had to learn to be a leader. You said early on, from the question that I asked, you said, hey, I was very young, I got involved in this, and I had to learn from the people that were around me. I'm going to ask a little bit different question right now. What about somebody that is coming up and they're questioning, like, okay, well, is this person right? Is this person the wrong one? How do I connect with them? What are maybe outside of people, some resources that you would recommend? Because obviously people is, I think, the best one, but what are some other resources that you would recommend for somebody to grow their leadership? Like, take the bull by the horns. I'm going to take the initiative, and here's where I need to start, because I don't have that outside training and I don't know who to lean on.
Absolutely. I would say start by reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts, and going out there on a quest for knowledge. Because if you're on a quest for knowledge, you'll find things, right? Like right now, I just pulled this up. I'm reading I'm listening to two audiobooks right now. One's called The Pumpkin Plan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the
The
pumpkin plan
pumpkin
at all.
plant?
Yeah,
No.
the pumpkin plan. The pumpkin plan.
Okay, no, I'm not.
Yep.
I'm not familiar.
And then
with that.
another one's called Chop Wood, Carry Water, right? And it breaks down doing these very, very simple tasks. Chop wood and carry water does, because that's what the samurai used to do, right? And you have to learn how to chop wood and carry water before you did anything else in the samurai village. And little things like that. And reach out to anybody that'll listen to you. I mean, reach out to people. With social media and everything else we have available to us right now, I mean, there's no excuse for people not to be able to access others. I'd look on LinkedIn. I'd look on Facebook. I would, again, go to podcasts like yours. I mean, a lot of valuable guests on here. I've seen a lot of my friends on here. Read a lot of books, listen to audiobooks. But if you quest knowledge and you ingest that knowledge on leadership and how to be a good leader, I have a feeling you will find the right people. There's forums for this. There's a million avenues to get into it. And if you don't think you can find somebody on social media or things like that, go to the Chamber of Commerce. Go join some local associations. Go join a leadership committee in your town. They're everywhere. I go to a breakfast club every Wednesday when I'm at home, and
That's awesome.
We meet. It's all business leaders, and we get together and we figure out, one, what's working for you, what's not working for you, what are your struggles, and then also we bring in charities and learn about all that kind of stuff. But there's a million avenues out there. In 2024, there's a plethora of places to go to look for help.
No, I think you're spot on. One of the things that I hear kind of coming together through all of that, you're saying, hey, go look for people, go look for podcasts, go out and connect with the Chamber of Commerce. And I know I repeat myself, but again, so it's so I can clarify and sort of break it out in my own head. One of the things at the root of all of that, and for anybody listening to the show, one of the things that I just took from what James said is, you've got to take deliberate action. Yeah. It's not just going to show up in your life. I mean, right? You had some people that were in your life, but at the same time, you had to take some deliberate action to follow those people. You had to take some deliberate action to do the things that they were asking of you. So yeah. Fast forward here where you're at now. So you're now the vice president of a company.
Correct.
Right?
Cognittion.
So how the vice president of Cognittion, we'll put that up on the screen if I can find it. I've got to figure out which button. So and Cognittion does you said Amazon advertising, OTT, right?
Correct. We do OTT, we do Amazon advertising, which is programmatic display, streaming radio. We use the data and audiences provided to us from Amazon to provide the most highly targeted marketing really in the history of automotive, because of the fact that it is using all of that data. And then we also are ingesting in dealers' data, first-party data, our agency partners' data, and combining all that together for the most highly targeted programmatic advertising that I've personally ever seen. And so this has been a lot of fun for me to join this company. I've been here for about 8 months now. We're young, we're a startup, we're nimble, got a lot of young people out here to help.
Awesome.
It's a ton of fun, and we are in the trenches. So if you want to learn about anything, Amazon OTT, we do other OTT, we do Roku, and we do Samsung, and we do a lot. But
Sure.
reach out. I'd love to educate on that. I've been doing a lot of speaking on this lately.
Yeah, no, I think the last event you and I were at several months ago, you were speaking on this stuff. So cognitionads.com for more information. And again, I'll share your number again before the show's over. So how has your leadership maybe style or role changed over the years? You went from, really being that frontline manager, it sounded like, and taking from those guys, to now you're the vice president of the company, right? And so how, for somebody that's growing in their leadership, what are some key changes that you've noticed with yourself, removing from that frontline manager to where you're at now?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, when you're the frontline manager, for some reason, you think the other guys have it all figured out. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? We're all just trying our best. But what I've learned is to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's part of leadership, is leading and then being able to accept your losses, because losing is part of leading. And it really is. Not everything's going to be good. When you're the person that's solving problems for an organization and others are looking to you to solve problems, it's going to cause some stress. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be hard, right? But accept that and be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think earlier in my career, I was nowhere near as kind of, no one really has anything figured out. I love it.
That's my buddy Mike Atchie. He runs a channel called Leadership with Mike, and I'm thankful that he's tuned in, because he'll gain a lot from what you have to share, and he's right on.
Was he the gentleman I met in Texas with you?
No, he's that was Ian. Ian's another friend, runs a leadership channel. I'm in that circle of leadership gurus, so to speak. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's great. And as you evolve and you get further along in leadership and you get these higher level positions at companies, you then realize that if you, like I said, if you're not failing or making mistakes, you're really not pushing that company forward. But what I've learned is, when I make a mistake, how I handle that and how my team sees me handling that is really the most valuable part. So I make more mistakes than everybody at the company combined every day. It's like what I like to tell people. And that's probably accurate. Awesome. But that's my job. If I'm not making mistakes, I'm not trying. And I want them to feel, empowered to make mistakes, empowered to make an error, because that's what innovation is. And that's what leadership is.
That's a strong statement, James. Let me ask you, when you're saying, hey, I want people to feel empowered to make mistakes, I don't want to give the wrong direction here, because I've said this in my own career, like, hey, I'll make 10,000 mistakes. Just don't make the same one twice, right? When you start making the same mistake over and over, it's not a mistake anymore. It's a choice, right? And
correct.
So when you're saying, hey, I make more mistakes than anybody at the company, and I think it's really powerful that you said it's important that your people see how you handle those. When you realize something is botched, you screwed it up, or you made a bad decision, what is your approach? How do you handle it?
Just laugh, make fun of myself. A little self-deprecation never hurt anybody. But I mean, it's a part of it. You have to be okay with it. Yes. Do I get upset when I lose a deal? I get more upset than anybody around, right? Of course. Am I competitive? I am extremely competitive. Do I want to win everything? Of course I do, right? But that's passion. And there's a difference there, right? So my passion comes through. And when people see that, they will follow that. And then what I tell them is, I want to see your passion comes through. And maybe it's not all wavy, wacky, fun guy like me, but what is it that drives you? And then how do we improve? And again, like you said, making mistakes is fine. I train my salespeople to go for no, right? Because if you're not getting no's, you're not working the process properly. So there's a book called Go for No. If anybody's ever not read it, Go check it out. It's great for salespeople. It's called Go For No, which
Go
means
for no.
instead of putting a quota out there for signed contracts, put a quota out there for no's.
Interesting.
Because think about it. If you know your close ratio is 20%, that means you got to hear, and you're talking to 100 clients, you got to hear 80 no's to get to your 20. So work those numbers backwards and go for that no, because yes, I got a no. And then imagine going back to me and saying, hey, I got 7 no's today. It means you were asking for the business. It means you were doing what was right. Now, how many yeses did you get? Well, I got 7 yeses. It's like, well, there you go. There's the answer. And
you've improved from 20% to 50, right? At
exactly.
7 and 7.
But think about what that does for the psychology of those underneath you to know that they can come to you and you're not going to get mad or berate them or anything like that about getting a no, that you're going to congratulate them for doing their job, for doing a good job and getting a no. And then that's where you go into coaching on how to get a yes in the future, right? Because I do want yeses.
Absolutely.
But that's kind of the psychology that I like to come at it from.
I think that's that's just really, really well-rounded leadership of you to be able to say it. And I'm like you, I'm very competitive. And I think a lot of people in leadership roles, introvert, extrovert, doesn't matter. If you're in a leadership role and if you're in a sales or marketing organization, people are competitive. That's how most people are. And so I think it's very well-rounded of you to say, hey, it's okay to get no's. The one thing that you have so much wisdom, James, that you said this without saying it, is the fact that you actually have that real one-on-one relationship with somebody. You said, hey, when they come back and they tell me they have no's, then I spend time coaching them. You don't just accept what they had to say. Oh, well, okay, great. You got no's. Okay, back to the drawing board, right? Or you moved them from 20 to 50%. When they're coming back and having that conversation with you, if it's not the result that you wanted, one, you're okay with it, right? Because they were doing, in your words, they were doing your job or doing their job. And then two is you said, hey, then I spend time in one-on-ones. I spend time coaching them. So you spend time molding what you want them to be, how you want them to be. And you can only do that through a real relationship with people, right?
Yeah. And it's fun to do. It is a lot of fun to do. I mean, when you take that personal relationship with someone and you watch them go from, in my life, I've had the pleasure of watching one of my former interns, a gentleman named Kyle McKenzie from the Cruise Automotive Group. He was my intern, right? He was at the University of Minnesota. And I watched him go from that to one of my sales executives, then to leave me. And then now he owns 5 stores. And watching that ascension has been unbelievably cool. And that's the part of leadership that I think sometimes get overlooked is if you put all this effort into people and you put all this energy into them, what happens when they leave? And that's something we hear all the time. It's like, well, what happens if they leave? And I'm like, if they're staying, something bad happened because that means I didn't do my job. Because if I'm going to lead, I'm going to lose some because they're going to ascend. And I think that's the biggest compliment that you can get is having someone go off and do bigger, better things. Now, this kid was a different ball of wax. The day I met him, I was like, wow, I'm going to work with you one day. And he has gone on to show that. So it's pretty neat.
That's awesome. So let me ask you, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit from being at the top of an organization. When you are in a leadership role, when you are a top manager, call it VP, CEO, one of the lead managers, what about the people that you are bringing on to either come onto the organization or to mentor? What are some key qualities? Let's say pick 3 qualities for people that you look or 3 qualities for people that you're looking for to bring on board into your organization.
Absolutely. Well, first they got to have a positive mindset, right? They got to be a positive person because negative just doesn't work. 2, they got to be enthusiastic about what they're doing. They've got to be excited. If I'm not excited about my product when I talk to my customers, how am I supposed to get them excited about it? And if we're going to spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our friends, and we're going to spend more time at work than we do with our families, right? Mm-hmm. You better be enthusiastic about what you're doing. And then number 3, it's all comes down to attitude. I mean, how's your attitude? And when I say that, I want to make sure I make myself clear. It's okay to get mad. It's okay to be upset. attitude doesn't mean you have a bad attitude if you get mad when you lose a deal, when you lose a client or anything like that. That's fine. But how's your attitude and how do you move forward from that? So if you have those three qualities, I think you can pretty much be coached up and be successful in life.
No, that's all really good. You said be positive, be enthusiastic, have good attitude. So how do you, and I want to ask you this because you're always literally every time you and I have ever talked, I don't believe I've ever seen you in a bad mood. I don't. Like, you are constantly, you have a smile, you have, and you're looking at me confused, like, oh, I've got him, but I've never, outwardly, I have never seen that from you. So, and being that you just brought it up and you're talking about attitude, how can a person continue to coach themselves, groom themselves to have an outwardly positive attitude? I don't want to say all of the time, but at least most of the time when you're interacting with other people. Is there anything that you do that helps you maintain that?
Absolutely. Gratitude. Remember things like, I woke up this morning in the United States of America in a wonderfully heated environment with a comfy bed and a coffee pot next to me, ready to roll. A third of the world wakes up every day and has to go look for drinking water, clean drinking water, right? So we're already so blessed we already won the lotto just by living here, right? So what do we really have to be upset about? Like, my kids are fine. They're happy. They're healthy. My family's doing fine. I have nothing to be upset about. And yes, I have bad days and all those types of things. But when you think about it like that and you look around at what's going on in the world, our problems aren't real problems. Like my dad always said, there's downtown problems and uptown problems. And uptown problems ain't real problems at all.
That's a good way to put it.
And those of us from the city will understand that because they're two very different problems. So
sure,
our problems aren't real problems. They can all be solved.
So is there something that you do to like reframe your brain for that? I'm just trying to get to the root, because I think you're like, and you put
I'm happy. I'm just a happy guy. I'm just happy.
I think I think it's so good. And the fact that you go right to gratitude, and even Mike here says, he says, this is huge. Like, it's one of those things. And even for me now, I'm like, I'm searching for it and I'm going, well, but there's got to be something else. And you're like, no, that's it, Mike. That's it. Just be thankful and be happy. And it's one of those, I think again, human nature is leadership. Like, we're constantly digging and looking for that other thing. And I want people to hear that from you. It's simple, right? We overcomplicate things.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And don't get me wrong, we're all going to have bad days. We're all going to have a bad week here and there, etc. But again, think about it. We won the lotto. So be happy with the lottery money and the life that you get to lead. Because there's a lot of people that are dreaming about your life.
Oh, that's a good way to put it too. There are a lot of people dreaming about the life you have.
My buddy Nick Brown says this all the time to me. He's a good buddy of mine, played basketball at Stanford, super smart guy. And he always says comparison is the thief of joy. And everybody's always comparing themselves to others. And that's the thief of joy. Just be happy being you. Be content being you. Again, you won the lotto. Be good with it. A million people out there willing to trade places with you tomorrow.
Dude, I think more people need to hear that right now in the US. More people need to hear that in the world. Because there's, especially you look on social media, you look on the news, and there's so much that's like just coming at you, and it's and people at each other. And when you just slow down and you look at things for what they really are, keep it simple. Like you said, Mike just said the same thing. Keep it simple, right? Have gratitude. Be thankful for where you are. You won the lotto. Love the life that you have. I think that's very, very eloquently said, James. So let me ask you, man, we're right about the 45-minute mark, and I like to keep it simple too. Any final thoughts to take us out?
Again, I think I just said it. Just be happy being you. Be happy being you. Look around. Be grateful for what you got. Go out there. Be on a quest for knowledge. Find like-minded people. Find people with your same goals. Find people that have achieved what you believe you want to achieve. And they will want to help you, because at some point, everybody was helped by somebody else. At some point, every human being wants to help another human being. And that's what I'd end it with.
That's awesome. So eloquently said. Great wisdom for the show. A lot of great insights. Thank you, James, for spending your afternoon with me. For anybody, one more time here, you can check out cognitionads.com for more information on, marketing and advertising, Amazon advertising and OTT with James. Certainly you can connect with James directly. His cell phone, that's his cell phone. He said, hey, share it, man. That's the kind of person that he is. 406-595-4818. And you can text or call him. James, thank you very much for spending the afternoon with me on the Leadership Toolkit. And if you want to hang out for just a minute, I will go ahead and take us out, man.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And that's going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit with my good friend, James Klaus. What a great conversation and just a great all-around show. I always enjoy this and I learn so much myself. Do me a favor. If you've gained some knowledge from this, if you heard something that either you want to hear again, or you know somebody in your circle that could grow from this, please share the episode. It's on all of the different platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you name it, it's there. Share that. And then it'll be on all the audio platforms afterwards, anywhere that audio podcasts are heard. Please tune in with me again next week, Wednesday at 12:05 p.m. Mountain Time. And until then, everybody, be great. We'll talk to you soon.